Hello people, welcome. My name is Adam. This is Memento Mori, okay? And this is the first video in a series of videos that I'm going to be doing focusing on books as physical objects, okay? And throughout it, we're going to talk about, why we acquire books, how we get rid of them, how we store and organize them, what format do we collect books in, and why do we collect them in the first place? Okay, we're going to go through a whole bunch of stuff. But here in the first video, I thought we would start at home base with the bookshelf, right? And, you can see my bookshelf behind me. If you follow me on social media, you would know that earlier in the year, I had bookshelf drama. Okay, bookshelf drama. And I moved to a new place in February, and I needed new shelving. And for a long time, when I moved, I had just, the books in large piles stacked against the wall, which was horrible, not only because that's a really bad way to store books, but without fail, every time you would want to read a certain book or reference a book, it would always end up being like the second to last book, at the bottom of any given stack, right? It was horrible. So I was dealing with that. I needed shelving, and I had a vision, okay? For those of you that may be new to the channel, sometimes I do have these visions. I had a vision of American-made heavy orange steel, okay? Very specific, American-made heavy orange steel. Had the vision, had to have it made. I found a company in Minnesota, of all places, to do it. It took these people over 3 months to build these goddamn slats of steel. And trust me, I've been to Minnesota. There is absolutely nothing going on there. So I don't know what they were doing. I'm convinced it was the whole orange thing that threw them for a loop. But nevertheless, they finally finished it, and they shipped it to the West Coast, and yeah, it was nice after over 4 months of having my goddamn books on the floor to finally get them up on the shelf. So in terms of the amount of books I own around like 1,100 to 1,200 books, and the majority of them, again, on the bookshelves, but I do have some elsewhere in the home. I have a little rolling cart of mass market paperbacks, which I'll actually talk about in a future video. So I have those, and then I do have still a few piles of books on the floor in the corner, the bastard children, okay? And I'll talk about them later in the video. But the bulk of them are on the shelves, and in terms of organizing them, I do put them in order of author's last name. I think people who do otherwise are unstable, especially, we're not going to dive into the whole people that do it by color, by spine color. That's the wrong sorts of people, you guys. And if you do that, hit the unsubscribe button, unding the bell, because I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to be a part of it, okay? I do combine all genres, though, so, fiction and nonfiction and poetry and plays are all kind of mixed together. Which obviously the bulk of my collection is fiction, so it's kind of easy to fold the rest in. I do make an exception for kind of oversized stuff, so I have like cookbooks and some graphic novels. I'll keep those to the side. But otherwise, yeah, everything's kind of mixed in together and organized by last name. So a big topic you will hear people discuss when they talk about their collections or their bookshelves is the amount of unread books they own. And that's something, people get very concerned about it. And it's something that's always been weird to me because I'm someone, I'd say probably about a third of the books that I own are unread, and it's never once bothered me because, you know, I want to read them. So why would it bug me? It's such a foreign concept to me. But I also think it's because, you know, I don't acquire books because they are popular or hyped, or because they've been nominated for a book prize, or I don't do cover buys. So yeah, you know, you hear people saying things constantly like, well, I bought this book because it was cheap at a library sale and I don't really know what it's about, but it looked kind of interesting. Or, you know, I went into my indie bookstore and they had a novel that had a fox on the cover, so I picked it up. Like, that's, you know, that's the wrong way to do things, people. And I think that's it. I think the largest part of it is people getting books when they're very popular and very hyped, and you get the books and you don't read them at the peak of their popularity, and then suddenly it's 6 months later and you have all these books on your shelf which you don't even really remember why you got them in the first place. Then yeah, if I had a shelf full of those sort of books, that would definitely stress me out. But again, that's just such a stupid way to read that it's something I luckily cannot relate to. So yeah, it certainly doesn't bother me having unread books. Again, just because I know why every book is there. You know, you could walk into my home and pick any book off my shelf, and whether I've read it or not, I could tell you, you know, why it's there and why it holds interest to me, okay? So then we also have to talk about getting rid of books, right? I like to get rid of books. I don't like to hoard. I don't like having books just for the sake of having them. I like to streamline my collection as time goes on. But it's not something I like to think about a lot. So for many, many years, I've delegated the act of getting rid of books to 2 specific times of the year. So I do it once in January, right after the new year, and then once in the middle of the summer. So twice a year. And it's really nice because it really frees up my mind the rest of the year, because I don't even think about getting rid of books. Even if I read something that I know I'm going to get rid of, you know, in the back of my head, I'll know it, but I'll still throw it back on the shelf, or I'll throw it back on a stack within the home, just because I know that I'll take care of that in January or July, right? So it's not something I need to worry about. During those times when I do purge, I sit down for an hour or two and I go through every single book that I own, and you know, I just ask myself whether I'm going to read that, or am I going to reread that, or do I really need that to exist within my collection? And usually I'd say I get rid of an average of like 20 to 30 books every time I do one of those purges. And yeah, it's created a really kind of healthy flow for me in terms of books coming into the house and books leaving. So it works. And then finally, I mentioned that stack of books on the floor, right in the corner, the bastard children, right? Those ones, I probably should find shelving for those as well, but for now they're kind of manageable where they're at. But those are made up of a few different types of books, but the bulk of them are books by authors that I have not read yet. So first-time authors. With the case behind me, certainly there are a lot of unread books on there, but they're all by authors that I've read. I'm sure there's a few exceptions on there, but for the most part, it's all by authors that I've read. So for example, I have 13 Philip Roth novels. I've read 9 of them, but I'm obviously not going to separate, the books that I have read with, from the ones I haven't. I'm going to keep them all together. So these are, first-time authors who have yet to earn their way on to the Mac Daddy bookshelf, right? And I pulled just like 3 off the top of the stack. For example, we have Tom McCarthy, haven't read him. Carlos Fuentes, need to get to him. And then a newer one, Lisa Halliday with, Asymmetry. I think this was her debut, which I want to get to soon. So a few examples of authors who need to, earn their way onto the bookshelf. And then the next type of books down there, which is kind of a weird category, which are books that I want to read, but I know that I won't keep. So this is kind of specialized. Usually it's authors that I like to read, but I have no interest in really collecting. So for example, I have a couple Joyce Carol Oates, and over the past few years, I've gotten into Joyce Carol Oates, and I really enjoy reading her, but I just have no interest in keeping her books once I've finished them. Not to say that couldn't change, but for now, yeah, I read them and then they leave the home. But I do like having a couple on deck at any given time. And then Haruki Murakami, another example. If you've watched the channel, I have a very love-hate relationship with Murakami, mostly hate. But he's someone I've read a lot of, and another author. I get the books, I read the books, I get rid of the books. Okay, I don't need these on my shelf. And then the final category for the bastard children down on the floor is books that I own doubles of, and I actually try not to do this because I'm, even though I obviously like collecting books to some degree, I'm not into like collecting different editions of my favorite books really, or, I'm not into first editions. So I try not to do this, but there are a few cases where I do own more than one copy of the same book. For example, I have 3 copies of my beloved short stories of John Cheever, which, I refuse to give up, which is unhealthy. And then I have stuff like here. I have 3 copies of The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Spark. A few of her novels I have doubles of. But this is more just because she's an author who I gift a lot or hand to people. So whenever I see a book of hers that I like for cheap, online or at a store or whatever, I'll nab it up. And I think I gift her not only because I really like her, but her books are quite short. So if you give it to someone and they hate it, you don't feel guilty about eating, too much of their time. And also, obviously, they're easier to store. So, that's a more kind of a selfless, ownership rather than for my own collection. But again, I try not to do the whole, collecting multiple edition things very often. So those are of a minimum. So yeah, that was a little insight to my bookshelves. I don't know if this is considered a bookshelf tour or not, but yeah, it's nice. No matter how much I would like to believe that I am above the physicality of books and book collecting, we all, or at least the majority of us all, do collect books in one way or another. So it's nice to kind of step back and reflect on that a little bit. And I would love down below to hear your own thoughts about your own bookshelves. And even better yet, if you have a channel, make a video response. I would love to see, how do you organize your books? How do you deal with books coming in versus books going out? Do you stress out or even think about the unread books on your bookshelves? All of that. And of course, you can veer this off into a million different ways. Take a moment, reflect on your own bookshelves. Again, I look forward to hearing your thoughts, and I look forward to continuing the conversations in future videos where I talk about books as physical objects, and in some case, digital objects. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.